Hello everyone! We are going to talk about media and technology. This is one of my favorite lectures ever. And because I personally study video games, so this is right here in my wheelhouse. So this lecture is going to be in two parts. First, we are going to discuss some of the kind of basic overall sociological ideas about media and technology. And then in the second part, we are going to learn about specifically how sociologists can apply our sociological imagination to things like virtual worlds and video games in particular. So let's get started on part one. Now remember when we talked about stratification and our dividing things up by classes? Well, in technology you can also experience some sort of stratification, and this is mostly applied by talking about the digital divide, which is uneven access along race, class, and geographic lines. So basically this talks about the idea that just like when we're talking about economic class, where some people have access to economic capital and others don't, the same thing happens with technology. When you divide people up by class, when you divide people up by race, and when you divide people up by sort of global geographic regions, or even by country, or even within this country, in the United States, you can see that not everybody has equal access to technology and to certain kinds of the mass media. So as an example, even here in the US, there are different kinds of access, different kinds of speeds of internet, for example. You might have seen some commercials for high-speed internet via satellite, which is made to get internet and quick internet speeds to those perhaps in more rural regions that perhaps don't have access to the high-speed internet access, DSL or cable, T1 connections, etc., that we have here on a sort of coastal major urban centers, right? So even here in the US, there are people that do not have equal access to high-speed internet. And when you think about what high-speed internet can get us, for example, it can get us access to things like Netflix, or being able to play certain kinds of video games that require an internet connection to even work, right? If you do not have a good high-speed internet connection, you can't access a lot of the things that people perhaps in coastal regions can. Huge downloads, Netflix, Hulu, all sorts of fun stuff like that. So when we're thinking about access to technology and the media, always keep in mind that not everybody can access these things equally. And because of this digital divide, it produces what is called a knowledge gap. And this is a gap in information for those who have less access to technology. Nowadays, libraries are becoming a lot slimmer, and the internet is kind of our major source of information. Think about when was the last time you picked up a newspaper. There's a newspaper. It's when they used to print out the news on a piece of paper. You used to get it every day. That's how people used to have the news. And some people do enjoy a newspaper still. But more and more, we are relying on the internet to be our kind of major source of information. And if you do not have access to the internet, if you don't have access to things like Twitter or Facebook, where news can spread very, very quickly, then there is a gap in information. There are some people that have more access to information than others, especially because of the internet, but in particular, even just the technology that it would take to print and produce newspapers and be able to disseminate them widely. Some countries do not necessarily even have that kind of rapid technology to have the news spread around and get people informed, right? So as you're enjoying your media and as you're enjoying your technology, keep in mind that these things cannot be accessed equally all around the world. Now, when it comes to technology, this is an important part of it, something that we come across very, very much, and it's often probably one of the most frustrating parts of it's one of the most frustrating parts of technology use, and that is planned obsolescence, where people actually will create a product, and it's a very common business practice, we will create a product and plan for the product to not be used anymore, to be unusable, to be completely obsolete after a certain period of time. Think about some examples of things where you know that once you buy them, they're already starting to feel old. Like, think about what was the first thing that you listened to your music on. For some of you, it might have been an iPod, but for others, it might have been a Walkman or some sort of CD player, maybe even a cassette player. And think about how quickly technology actually advances, and that by the time you buy a piece of technology, you know, and we sort of grow up with this idea of planned obsolescence now and become more used to it, you know that once you buy something, in a couple of years, maybe as soon as a few months, especially in the case of our friend the iPhone here, something new is going to be announced. As soon as you buy a computer, you know that you're going to have to upgrade it at some point. As soon as you even buy a car nowadays, you already know that after a certain time period, it is going to be obsolete, it is going to be unusable. So think about some examples of technology that engages in this practice of planned obsolescence, and think about what kinds of things you have in your home that as soon as you buy them, you already kind of knew, well, there's going to be some sort of new hotness coming out, and this thing is going to be obsolete in a few weeks, right? So think about things like smartwatches. Every single year there's a new iPhone, and some people do feel the need to upgrade every single year because of this idea of planned obsolescence. Think about the fact that things maybe aren't as sturdy as they used to. I remember I had a Nokia. All it did was make phone calls and play Snake. And it was awesome, and it was the coolest thing ever, but I had that thing for years without even thinking about needing an upgrade. I found it a few months ago, and it still powered on, it still worked. I could probably throw it off the balcony right now and it would survive the fall. And think about pieces of technology that can survive the most serious bumps and bruises. Technology now has not only gotten more advanced, but you can argue that it has gotten more fragile, and things are a lot easier to break. You could probably count on both hands, and maybe you might even need your toes, the amount of people that you find walking around that you know that have broken screens on their phones and cracked screens, right? So this is kind of part of planned obsolescence. Not only the idea that technology is changing more and more rapidly to the point that your new hot thing is going to be obsolete in a year or even a few months, but also the fact that your technology is fragile, so it might not even last that long anyway. So, media and technology, those are two very, very broad terms. So what is it that we are talking about when we talk about media and technology in the first place? The first thing is the print news, and yes, that is still a thing that happens. You probably know somebody that still reads a newspaper. I know a couple of students of mine that actually said that they actually do enjoy reading a newspaper every once in a while. So print news is part of the media. Television and radio are also part of the media and tech. And then new media, which is all of the fun new stuff that we are consuming nowadays. These are more interactive forms of information exchange. Blogs, podcasts, in case you don't know what a podcast is, it's basically sort of like if you recorded a radio show and you made it available for people to download on iTunes. And there are all sorts of podcasts on any sort of topic that you're interested in. You could probably find a podcast that talks about it. Shows about pop culture, or shows discussing books, shows discussing fashion, whatever it is. It's basically like a downloadable radio show. And you can go ahead and search for those on iTunes. Some of them are free. Then we have social media. Those are your Twitters, your Facebooks, your Instagrams, your Vines, etc. And virtual worlds can also be lumped in to new media, and we will go into virtual worlds more in depth in part 2. Now, what are the global implications of thinking about media and technology? Well, even though there is kind of unequal access to media and technology around the world, things are spreading a lot faster than they used to. And due to that, we have both media globalization and technological globalization. So when it comes to media globalization, this is the worldwide integration of media through the cross-cultural exchange of ideas. What does that mean? It means that it is entirely possible now more than ever for us to learn about what is going on around the world a lot faster. And the world has sort of gotten smaller, figuratively, in that sense. And we can learn about each other around the world, and people can learn about us. And that is how we can share our ideas, we can share culture, we can share new fashions from place to place, we can share new musical genres. You can be a fan of music from all around the world because media, especially new media, makes it possible for things to spread a lot faster. And technology is also the same thing. So there is more cross-cultural development and exchange of technology. For example, there are programs in place. I'm not sure if this is still a thing anymore, but I do remember a few years back, there was a company where if you bought a laptop, they would send a laptop to schools in developing countries, for example. So it's through basically charities like that, and also just in general the sort of global spread of information and the fact that we are in an information society, that makes it possible for actual technology to spread around the world and not just the media that the technology holds within it. So, as in all things, everything has, you can sort of look at things with a variety of sociological perspectives. And our big 3 sociological perspectives are functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. Good job if you knew all 3 before I said them. Well done. You've been learning stuff. So, media and technology is no exception, and a functionalist will look at things in a different way than perhaps a conflict theorist or a symbolic interactionist. So let's look at how a functionalist would look at media and technology. So the big deal about a functionalist, what is the big main thought? It is that everything has its purpose and everything has its place. So what purposes does the media serve? We have a commercial function, where it's clearly evident by television commercials and ads that you see on the internet, right? One of the big functions of our media is to sell things to us. That is the commercial function. Entertainment functions is probably the most kind of manifest function, right? Remember that there are manifest functions and latent functions, where a manifest function is the intended function. So a big manifest function is entertainment, right? Basically trying to entertain you. And perhaps underneath that subheading is probably also trying to inform you. Although nowadays, even in the news, we have what is called infotainment, where we say that we're trying to sort of educate you and give you the news, but really we're trying to do it in a way that is entertaining. A show like The Daily Show, or even perhaps recent shows that have sort of started to crop up on things like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, etc. Those can also fall under the entertainment or specifically infotainment function. And then perhaps more of a latent function is the social norm function. Now, it would be a manifest function if it was something like Sesame Street, where pretty much the actual goal of Sesame Street is to teach you things, and especially teach you social norms like how to share, how to be chivalrous, all sorts of kinds of things about manners, etc., right? And that would be kind of a manifest function of Sesame Street, is to teach you social norms. But in general, the media will also have this social norm function. So think about things like shows that depict weddings and things surrounded to weddings, like a reality show about saying yes to the dress, for example, right? Sure, it's entertaining, but the fact that the show exists and the way that the show portrays the process of buying a wedding dress, it actually educates people on how important the marriage ritual is in American culture in particular, and how important the wedding dress is to that ritual, right? And the more shows that pop up that focus on the wedding ritual in particular, the more it tells us as a society that this is a particular important ritual and one that maybe everybody has to or should go through in their lives. Other things are even comedy shows like dating shows or fictional shows that depict dating scenarios can actually kind of tell us how it is that we are supposed to court people or woo people. You can actually see the differences throughout time of how things like dating and marriage have been treated through television shows. And you can kind of trace how we've progressed as a society and how our social norms have progressed by looking at our entertainment and looking at our media. Then there is also the life-changing function, which is not often when it happens, but it does have a tendency to happen. And the life-changing function, one of the kind of key factors, is this idea of narcotizing dysfunction. And think about a time, think about a news story, maybe it was some sort of sensational celebrity news thing that happened, or maybe it was some regional or national or international tragedy. Sometimes the coverage of that topic can be so overwhelming. You could be bombarded with so much of that message, you end up becoming numb to it. That is where the sort of narcotizing dysfunction comes in. You can become so overwhelmed with something that maybe you sort of stop caring about the issue. You just kind of want to turn off the television and turn to something else. You may feel like you need to take a break from the media for a while. Or maybe you just stop caring, right? In the case of, if some Kardashian is getting married or some pop star is getting arrested, and that's all anybody ever can talk about for a day, it can get to the point where it's just like, I just really don't care about stuff anymore. And you want to disengage with your media. So try and think about times when maybe you might have felt overwhelmed by media coverage or something, overwhelmed to the point of not caring, or overwhelmed to the point of perhaps feeling numb to it. Now, if you are a conflict theorist, on the other hand, think about what a conflict theorist might be concerned with, and think about a conflict theorist in our kind of major conflict theorist being Karl Marx, and our major conflict theorist having to think about class, and it's pretty much in the name, conflict theory, that we are looking at inequalities, we are looking at conflict between two groups, and in particular, when it comes to the media, we want to see who it is that has control over media and technology. Who is it that has the capacity to create new advances in technology? Who has the capacity to use all of this cool new technology? So class plays a major role into it. And who has control over our media? Who has control over our news? Who's producing our news? Who owns our news? Who owns our entertainment? And what kinds of messages are we getting from those people? A process called gatekeeping describes how it is that we have a tendency to kind of dilute and compress a lot of our major world news, regional news, national news, local news, etc. And we have to somehow digest it down into a consumable form that a lot of people can access. And it has to be attractive, and it has to be somewhat entertaining, and it has to be somewhat worded in a way that is going to grab the attention of a lot of people, right? Because sure, we want to educate, sure, we want to inform, sure, we want to entertain, but we also want to sell advertising, right? So there are a lot of things that happen in the world on a daily basis, and news organizations, for example, can't report every single thing that happens. So the process of gatekeeping makes it so that there are certain people that make decisions as to whether or not this is a story worth reporting. And when it comes to the advertisements that play in between those bits of news, think about how expensive it is to make a commercial. Think about how expensive it is to buy the ad space to put a commercial in it. Think about Super Bowl commercials. Those are the most expensive commercials ever. Millions and millions of dollars for 30 seconds worth of commercial, right? Who has that kind of money and who doesn't, right? Those with the means can buy the space to advertise their particular product. So you hear from a select amount of products and not from others. Another thing that a conflict theorist is concerned with is social control and digital surveillance. So think about every single time you might have checked into some place on Facebook or on Foursquare. Or think about whether location services are turned on your phone. These are the things that a conflict theorist is concerned about. And the idea that we can track people's locations, we can track people's behaviors, we can track people's spending. If in some places, depending on whether or not you have the capacity to bypass this, say that I type in the word Oreos and, mention how much I love Oreos on Facebook or on Twitter. Chances are, once I post that tweet, or once I post that status update, as I crawl throughout the internet looking at other stuff, I'm probably going to end up seeing a lot more ads for Oreos on my websites. If I visit a clothing website, right, and I just visit it, look around, and then don't, X out the window. In a bunch of other websites that I might visit that day, I might still see advertisements for that very website that I went to earlier in the morning. So this idea of constant monitoring is monitoring of your internet activities, monitoring of perhaps your location stuff. All of that stuff can be seen as a form of panoptic surveillance, and that is a form of constant monitoring, and that is something that a conflict theorist is very much concerned with. Now, if you are a symbolic interactionist, you are all about the symbols and the ways that symbols can change and are interpreted through and interpreted by media and technology. And when it comes to a symbolic interactionist and looking at the sort of effects that the symbols of media and technology can have in our society, there are two camps. There are neo-Luddites and there are technophiles. A neo-Luddite is somebody who sees technology as symbolizing coldness and alienation of modern life. These are people that are concerned with how much we're looking at our phones each day. These are people that are concerned with how much time we spend on Facebook and Twitter versus, going outside and reading a book or something, right? These people are concerned that if we become too reliant on technology, we might lose sense of our, I don't know, real selves or true selves. Then there are technophiles, and these are people who see technology as holding the potential for a way brighter future. People who see the capacity for technology to change lives. They like to point out the sort of life-saving capacities of technology. Technology makes us more efficient. Technology makes it so that we can be better informed about things. Technology makes it so that we can save lives a lot faster. Think about conversations about 3D printing and the idea that someday we might be able to 3D print donor hearts or other organs for transplant without making people wait on excruciatingly long lists in order to get the medical help that they so deserve, right? Technophiles would sort of rally around this particular view of technology. Rather, the Neo-Luddite, on the other hand, might see technology as something that we can become dependent on and something that can alienate us from ourselves and from other people. Now, another thing that a symbolic interactionist would look at the actual symbols that are being generated from the media, and how it is that the media can help us construct our reality. And what do I mean? Think about how many words, how many new words we have just because of technology. iPod, iPad, iDevice, smartphone, texting, text speak, LOL, LMAO, BRB, etc., etc. Communicating with people in emoji or smiley faces. All of these different symbols, right? Language is a system of symbols. These are things that words and phrases and ways of communicating that we did not have 20, 25 years ago, right? The media and technology makes it so that the word selfie can be a thing that is introduced into the dictionary, right? That is a word. That is a popular word, right? Alternate ways of spelling things due to text speak. Media and technology make it so that our language changes, and the symbols that we receive from media help kind of perpetuate certain definitions of our world and our reality. Shows that depict what it might be like to be a single woman in New York with a bunch of her single friends, single older friends with well-adjusted careers, etc., right? So a show like Sex and the City, or a show like How I Met Your Mother, or a show like Friends. These are television shows, and these shows have an entertainment function, right? Those would fall under the function of entertainment, but these also give us particular symbols that help shape our reality of a given decade, right? So Sex and the City gave us thoughts about a woman's sexual autonomy and what it means to be single and what it means to be older and single, what it means to love shoes and love things like Manolo Blahniks and Louboutin shoes and the cosmopolitan cocktail. The media gives us these particular symbols of what it means to exist as a person in society at a particular time, and we tend to embrace those constructions of reality. And even reality TV is a construction of alleged reality that helps us to construct our own reality, right? So the media helps to construct a world where Kim Kardashian is a popular person. And a symbolic interactionist would be fascinated by the sort of way that Kim Kardashian is popular because she has a reality show, because she is a popular person, because she has a reality show, because she is a popular person, because she has a reality show. And these symbols are something that a symbolic interactionist would be absolutely obsessed with. And think about symbolic interactionist and think about, symbolic interactionism is also where we get a lot of our role theory as sociologists. And role theory gives us the concept of a reference group. And when we are playing a particular role, the audience of that role is our reference group. When you are a waiter or a waitress at a restaurant, your boss might be a reference group, but your customers are also a reference group, right? Those are people that you orient your behavior to. The media itself can actually be a reference group. The media influences you as an individual. It tells you what to buy, how it is that you're supposed to look, how skinny you're supposed to look, what kinds of lipstick and makeup and pants and diet sodas and things you're supposed to have. And it influences you, and then you also orient yourself to the media, and oftentimes you will compare yourself to these images that you see on screen. I wish I had eyebrows like this person. Maybe I should use Old Spice deodorant and Old Spice colognes or Axe body spray so that I can attract members of the opposite sex, right? Or of the same sex, who knows? So you end up comparing yourself to the media. There are actually studies that insist that the media really does have a strong effect on the individual, in particular advertisements that depict men and women in a certain way, and TV shows that depict women in particular shapes and sizes and that are, kind of unrealistic, right? And those can have a serious effect on how it is that people can actually move through this thing called society and life. So the media itself is a very, very strong reference group, and as we learned before in our agents of socialization, the mass media is a very strong agent of socialization. So it's definitely something to think about, and I hope that by the end of this lecture, this sort of part one of this lecture, in general, I would like you to sort of examine what kinds of media you consume on a daily basis, whether it's new media or things like print, television, and radio, and kind of think about the ways in which you might be influenced by these messages that you receive on whatever size screen you receive them on.